Welcome to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast, your go-to resource for all things tennis coaching. Stay tuned for insightful discussions and practical tips that will make a real difference on and off the court.
Should you copy professional tennis players? This is a reel that I got sent a fair few times over the past couple of weeks of Jannik Sinner, and he's practicing just before the start of the French Open, I believe. And a lot of comments and questions were sent to me saying, look, world number one, Grand Slam champion, uses basket drilling. They do isolated practice. So everything that you say negatively about basket drilling and isolated practice is wrong. So let's just have a little look at the clip that has caused quite a lot of comments to come through. So you can see, obviously, coach down one end feeding a couple of balls to Jannik, and he just hits forehands and backhands sort of side to side. So that's the clip that I got sent a fair few times. And obviously the title of this podcast is Do Not Copy Jannik Sinner. And we're going to unpack why you shouldn't copy Jannik. And it's interesting because when you go into the comments with this reel, like a lot of people going, oh my God, that's so good. It's so simple, but yet so effective. And we're going to sort of look at, is it effective? Why is Jannik decided to practice like that? What the dangers are of trying to copy or mimic professional players when they practice or train. And I think it's a common misconception that if we copy the pro players, then we'll get maybe not a similar level of success. But if the pros are doing it, then it must be working. And that's why quite a lot of coaches, parents, players sent me that clip of Jannik doing a basket drill at Roland-Garros and saying, you say all the time that basket drilling isn't very efficient and effective. Yet here's the world number one Grand Slam champion doing basket drilling. So surely it works. If it didn't work, why is Jannik doing it? So that's what we're going to unpack in this podcast. And I will go into a bit more detail in the clip itself. But I think there's a real massive temptation to copy the pro players because we believe that the pro players have reached the level that they've got to based on how they train and how they practice. And again, I did a call this week with a group of coaches over in Asia. And one of the questions was, yeah, but look at the Spanish. The Spanish do loads of basket drilling. They do loads of hand feeding, drop feeding, loads of suffering, as the Spanish like to call it. The Italians as well. And again, Jannik does a lot of basket drilling. The Russians, Spartak Moscow, one of the most famous tennis clubs in the world, who's produced lots of world number ones. A lot of their coaching is isolated practice and basket drilling. So the temptation is to look at these very successful players, these very successful federations or systems, and think, oh, well, it must work because look at these players, look at these top level players who are achieving this success. And people will look at that clip of Jannik at the French and go, well, he's doing it. He's world number one, so it must work. A couple of things I'm going to sort of talk about for that. Number one, there's no scientific evidence to prove any coaching methodology works. So there's no evidence to show that traditional coaching works. There's no evidence to show ecological dynamics works, because you have to understand that tennis players don't just have lessons. They play a lot of unstructured, and opposed practice. They play tennis an awful lot. They also will do lots of other sports, and they'll also engage with lots of other different activity like strength and conditioning and stuff. So you can't prove that isolated, explicit practice, traditional coaching is the reason why Jannik gets to world number one. You can't prove that a ecological approach will get a player to world number one because there's too many variables in play. There's just too many. There's too many different factors. And what's interesting, and it's really hard to sort of look at this because there's no actual evidence that's tracked it. But if you look at maybe a Jannik Sinner, if you look at all the hours he's had lessons, all the hours he's done basket drilling, all the hours he's done with opposed practice, so hitting and rallying and playing, all the hours he's done playing tennis matches, I guarantee he's done more opposed practice than unopposed. So he's done more representative practice, so with an opponent and live ball, than he has basket drilling, because that's the game he's playing. And I'll talk through why sort of basket drilling and the drawbacks of basket drilling in a few moments. We are live, by the way, on YouTube. If I had issues with my audio last time I was live, so if I'm coming through and it's a bit weird, please let me know. If I'm coming through loud and clear, let me know. Please feel free to ask any questions or post anything in the comments as well, and I'll reply to them in real time. So yeah, so there's no there's no scientific method to prove that a methodology of coaching is the reason why players are successful. What we do have, though, in science and evidence and research is we can look at different styles and different types of coaching. So we can look at opposed versus unopposed practice. So opposed is where you have a live opponent. Unopposed is what you see in the clip, where there's no opponent and Jannik's just hitting the ball into empty court space. There's loads of evidence and bodies of research out there to show that opposed practice is more effective in terms of skill transfer compared to unopposed practice. So that's why I go on about, well, basket drilling, it's not great for you. It's not really that good. Like, the transfer of learning is minimal. It's not very effective in terms of skill transfer. It's also not very effective in terms of transferring a skill into a match, because that's what the evidence shows us. So when I say you can't prove a methodology, what you can prove is different types of coaching practice against each other, because you can test that with experiments. You can test it with groups of players, and you can really contrast the two methods. So when we have opposed versus unopposed practice, opposed practice is more efficient and effective. We can then also look at internal versus external focus. So internal focus is where you get the player to focus on how they move. So again, traditional approach of coaching is all about working on technique and getting our elbows and our shoulders and the hips into certain positions, or our feet into certain positions. External focus is having a focus outside the body. So maybe what you're trying to do with the ball, or the cause and effect on the opponent. So again, the research shows us that the external focus is more effective. So when you have these studies, when you teach the two controlled groups, one who are taught very internal focus and one external, the external focus show more skill development. So again, we can look at all these factors in terms of different coaching methodologies. And that's why I definitely go down an ecological psychology, ecological dynamics approach, because the evidence and research shows us like that's more efficient and effective. You also then have to look at sort of psychology. And obviously you've got cognitive psychology, where you believe that the brain processes information. And then you've got ecological psychology, where you believe that the human system just interacts in real time and you don't really process information, you just perceive and act. Again, the research now is starting to show, well, it's probably more likely to be more like ecological, because the brain isn't a computer. The brain doesn't understand human sort of metrics like speed and distance. The human system tends to interact more with the environment. And again, lots of studies around sort of children and babies. Babies have no idea of distance or speed, but they're able to judge distance and speed really well, because again, they just interact with the world. So that's what we can prove and unprove. So it's quite attractive to copy the pro players, because we believe it must work because the top players are doing it. But what we have to understand is, well, the evidence shows us that it's not that efficient and effective. And what we believe is, again, we look at Jannik Sinner in that clip, world number one, about to play in sort of Grand Slam tournament. And we look at it and think, well, the best player in the world's doing it. And what happens with a clip like that, loads of coaches will take that on court and copy it. And we'll look at the clip again in a few seconds, and I'll unpack it from my perspective. But we have to understand that there's no context to that either. And I'll talk about the context in a few minutes. And just because the best players in the world are doing it doesn't mean you have to do it with your players. And I say this to my players and parents all the time. Like, what you have to understand, that Jannik Sinner is a professional tennis player. He is playing tennis every single day to a very, very high level. He's been playing tennis a long time to a very high level. You, as the player, or your son and daughter, one, you're nowhere near the age, you're nowhere near the athlete, and you're nowhere near the level of tennis that he's playing. Like, to be good at tennis at your level, You have to meet the demands at your level. And a great question I got sent this week on one of the calls that I've did was, well, when do you teach players topspin, Steve? Because surely topspin, you've got to teach him like how to hold the racket, and you've got to teach him how to brush up the back of the ball, and surely you've got to do that in an isolated and unopposed way first, and things like Topspin Pro, which we'll talk about maybe. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to teach you topspin if the game doesn't demand it. So if you're a beginner and you can play a game of tennis and be successful, and you don't need to hit with topspin, then you don't need to learn how to hit topspin. Now, obviously, when you get to a level and your opponent's a little bit better and you've got to maybe push him back behind the court more, then, okay, now we have to start to understand how we can manipulate the ball to get it to spin. But if you're playing at a level where you don't need to hit with topspin, then you don't need to learn it. So again, at red stage tennis, those kids don't need to hit with topspin. They really don't, because the court's so small, the ball's so soft and light. Like, you can pretty much play quite flat at sort of red. You don't need to learn topspin because the game doesn't demand it yet. And we'll talk about future proofing as well. Like, sometimes we look at the pro players and we think that's the destination. So that's where we need to get players to get to. And what we have to do is at red, orange, green, under 12s, 14, 16s, is we've got to teach him topspin. We've got to teach him split step. We've got to teach him ground reaction force. We've got to teach him shoulder over shoulder rotation. And we sort of trying to have this mind of building the body up or building the player up. So when they get to pro level, they've got all the tools in place, but they'll never play at that level potentially. Well, like, it's like less than 1% maybe to play at a pro level. So you're almost future-proofing a player that to a level that they're never going to play at. And again, a classic example, this is split step. Again, we'll look at red level tennis. You don't need to teach split step at red. You really don't, because you don't need to split step at red. The ball is so slow. The court is so small. You do not need a dynamic first step. So when we teach stuff at red that we think the players need later on, we're actually making it more difficult. What we should do is just teach the players where they're at. So meet the player where they're at. And again, it's a very common buzzword around coaching at the moment, meet players where they're at. Well, that's what we should do. We should be teaching players at red to play red really well. And that probably doesn't involve topspin or split or any split steps, really. So when we look at Jannik Sinner doing these drills, like, we can't then try and reverse engineer and go backwards and try and teach our red, orange, and green players to play like Jannik, because there's no point. Let's just make them really good red players. When they go to orange, we've got to make them really good orange players. Now, at orange, the court's bigger, the ball's quicker. We may have to encourage a split step there because the game may demand it, but it also may not. Like, if you're playing club level orange, you don't need a split step because the ball's not coming at you at any real speed. When you're playing county, regional, national level, you probably are going to split step. And what will happen in those situations is the movement will generally emerge anyway. As a coach, if it's not emerging, that's your job to try and guide and shape them. And again, there's this misconception that, okay, the skills we learn at red transfer to orange. Well, they don't. They're different skills. The skills you learn at red are based on the demands at red. The skills at orange are a different set of demands. Why? Because the environment's changed. The court's bigger, the ball's quicker, your opponent's bigger, stronger, but also you're bigger and stronger at orange. So therefore, you're learning new skills. Now, they may look similar to the red skills, but skills don't build upon each other. Skills adapt and change. And that's why, like, you'll see Djokovic, his forehand has changed over the years because his body's changed, but also the game has changed. So the demands of the game have changed. So Djokovic had to change his serve and his forehand to stay at the top level. And that's why, again, there's a great clip of the boy in Tarbes last year who played forehand on both sides. And again, you go into the comment section and it's all like, oh, that's never going to sort of stand up at a pro level. Like, he's going to have to change when he gets to a pro because that's going to break down. Well, you don't know, because if the player can adapt and play forehand on both sides at a higher level, he doesn't need to change. But again, this conception of what's right and what's wrong is really interesting. I think sometimes as coaches, we look at the pro level, we look at this drill that Sinner's doing and go, okay, well, if Jannik Sinner's doing it, then we will do it. But we don't appreciate, one, human development, two, skill acquisition or skill development. Skills don't build upon each other. So when we're teaching players at red and orange, we shouldn't be looking at Jannik Sinner and going, well, let's teach those skills to an 8-9-year-old. So when they get to Sinner's level, it's already there. You've got to meet the demands of the game. So I think that's a lot of misconception, and why we look at the pro clips and think, yeah, that's how we should get our pros to play. But we completely neglect the fact that they're professional athletes. They do it for a living, and they play at an unbelievable high level. And I have this conversation a lot with coaches. Like, the game itself doesn't change. Like, whether you're at a pro level or you're playing red, the game doesn't change. You still have to get the ball into a position which your opponent misses. The only difference is the level of skill, and possibly the pace will be completely different. But at red, I can beat you without using topspin. I can beat you without split stepping. I don't need to learn those skills to win and be successful at red. So that's sort of why it's quite appealing. And I think that's why a lot of parents and coaches and players really want to sort of go into that model. So let's just look at the clip again. So I've had to mute it because obviously I don't need copyright strike on YouTube. So we've got the coach in the bottom left, and he's just feeding balls. I'll play it a couple of times. One thing we don't know here is context. Like, we don't know what Jannik wants from this exercise or this practice. One thing I would say straight off the bat, though, is this is not a tennis lesson. Jannik Sinner is not having a lesson here at all. Okay, so we have to understand that when we see pro players practice, we will never see them have a lesson. Like, if we go to Wimbledon in a few weeks, or for that Roland-Garros, I'm at the practice courts, like, even though there's a coach on court, it's not a lesson. They are probably just getting a feel for the conditions, feel for the environment. Like, he might be getting a feel for the court here. Again, I don't know the context. And that's the hard thing without context, because we don't know what Jannik wants from the practice. It may be a case of the coach. Again, I don't know who the coach is here, but the coach probably can't hit at the level Sinner wants. So Sinner just wants to hit a few balls. Now, when I've shown this clip to a few people over the past couple of weeks in different workshops and different webinars, they've said, oh, yeah, maybe he's just doing it for confidence. Potentially. But the confidence is going to be built on quite shaky ground, because, again, there's no cause and effect. When he hits those shots, the ball's not coming back. So yes, it may look like he's hitting the ball really well, but let's say he's playing Djokovic and Djokovic smashes the first ball past him for the winner. The confidence he's built up in this situation quickly disappears. So the whole idea, and again, I was talking to a coach last night and he said, well, I still do basket drilling to build confidence in players. I'm like, it's fake confidence though. It's confidence built on very shaky ground, because yes, you'll build confidence in this scenario, but when you get into a more open and dynamic and chaotic scenario, that confidence disappears. And the way I relate it to is a bit like boxing or mixed martial arts. Like, I can have a heavy bag and I can practice my striking on a heavy bag all day long. I can work on my technique and rotating my hip into the punch and all that good stuff. And I can practice that all day long. And I'll get really good at striking the heavy bag, and my confidence will grow in my striking. Once I get into a fight and get punched in the face, that confidence goes, because it's a different context. And from an ecological dynamics point of view, or ecological psychology point of view, the skill that's being developed here is a different skill. Because again, if you look at it, the coach is feeding from the same position. It's definitely unopposed. So when we teach our players this type of sort of basket drill or closed practice, of course they get good, because they know where the ball's coming from. So that completely decouples perception action. The ball's coming from the same position every single time in the same way. And I would say the coach here is feeding the ball very neutral. Like, he's not putting any topspin on the ball. It's not really putting Jannik under any pressure whatsoever. He's pretty much hitting the forehand like I would hit my forehand. And to someone at the level of skill of Jannik Sinner, like, that's so easy. So it's not even challenging Sinner to adapt and sort of try and sort of challenge him a little bit either. So of course he's going to find it comfortable. Of course he's going to make loads of shots. So that level of skill that our players develop in here it's decontextualized, because in a match, number one, this first shot Sinner hits, I've got to hit the ball back. Now, if Sinner's shot's no good, I'm going to put him under challenge on the next one, which doesn't happen in this situation, because he gets an easier ball next. The ball just comes back to him in a nice, easy way. And there's a little bit of challenge because he's moving. But again, Jannik's a professional athlete. Like, he can get to that ball quite easy. He's under no stress here. So when we look at these exercises, and again, when you go through the comment section, it's stuff like, oh, it's great for movement. It's great to teach in the slide. It's great to get him to play off balance. Like, 1, he's not sliding. 2, he's not balanced. 3, he's not even challenged. So when we look at these type of practices, especially when we then try and reverse engineer this back to our players, like, Jannik's getting 0% from this from a skill point of view. What he might get from this exercise is just get a feeling for the environment, get a feeling for the speed of the court, get a feeling for being in the court itself and sort of what's around in the environment. And I know it sounds really silly, but like the noise and the feel of the environment. From the actual tennis perspective, I would say he's getting 0% from this. So when we bring this back to our clubs, not only are we losing perception action, not only are we developing skill and isolation, when we put this back into a more representative practice, that's where it breaks down as well. So we just got to be really careful when we watch drills like this and think, well, if the world number one's doing it, therefore it must work. It must be really, really effective. Just going to pause there for 2 seconds. It's great because we're getting quite a few comments and stuff, which I'll get to in a few minutes. So please do stick on and I'll answer your questions and comments. If we do have any more questions and comments as well, please keep them going because I want these live streams to be a bit more interactive and stuff. But that's my analysis. And again, I'm not saying Jannik Sinner is wrong, by the way, and he shouldn't be doing it because I don't know the context. But I guarantee, 1, he's not learning how to play tennis. 2, he's not looking to develop any tennis sort of skill here whatsoever. He's probably just doing it to get on court, get a feel for the environment. And you'll see it at Wimbledon that it's sort of in a few weeks. Like, the players will do drop feeding and basket feeding and stuff. And generally it's a case of just sort of getting on court and getting used to the conditions, things like the weather and the pace of the court and the bounce of the court and stuff like that. And it's not a lesson. So just on that point, if you do like to sort of see more about how I coach and get more information from me, please do check out the link in the comments, but also check out the link below as well. I send out 2 newsletters a week, a Monday and a Friday, and it's about sort of my lessons over the week, things that I've learned. And also I put in there some stuff that you can take away as well. So if you're interested in my newsletter, do check out the description below. So what we miss when we copy, we miss so much because we try and reverse engineer stuff that we see the pros do, but might not even be the pros because we may look at a county player within our club. So we've got 1 county player and the rest are club players. And we may think, well, that county player is the template. If we get everyone else to copy that county player, then we'll be really successful. And I see this all the time from national governing bodies and head coaches. You'll see a very successful player and you look at their training, you look at the drills they do, you look at how they're coached, and then you just copy and paste it onto everyone else. And you think that it should work. And this actually backs up the whole idea why traditional coaching doesn't quite work the way it does. Because for, 100 years, we've basket fed, we've done demonstrations, we've done lots of repetition in isolation. We've all taught tennis a very similar way. But only a few players are successful. And I look at my own coaching in this regards, and I said it on a podcast a few weeks ago. The coaching, what's it called now? It'll come back to me. But I said, well, I used to think I was really successful because I had like 1 or 2 national level players working with me. But what I didn't see is the 98, 99 players who weren't successful. And they all played the same way. They all had the same coach. They all did the same lesson. They all did the same drills. But only 2 players were at a national level, and 98 of my players were nowhere near that. And I used to think, well, it's just down to the players. The players don't want it enough. The players aren't committed enough, and that's a word that gets used a lot, committed. But the truth of the matter is, the 2 players that maybe were successful were probably successful despite my coaching. They were probably successful because they played loads of matches. They were probably successful because they played loads of other sports. They're probably successful because they turned my traditional coaching methods into something they could use. And the 98 players, my coaching methods just weren't very good. And that's one of the reasons why I look down at the ecological approach, because you can't just copy and paste. Even if I do an ecological drill with 2 players, I'll get 2 different results because those 2 players are different behaviors, different body types, different game styles, different times of the day. Again, I could do the same drill with the same player on 2 separate days and get 2 different outcomes. And that's the problem with copy and paste coaching. And it's so much of it now, especially with the rise of social media, because we'll look at some very popular tennis accounts, Tennis with Dave, and we'll just copy Tennis with Dave because he's got loads of followers and we believe that Dave knows what he's talking about. And Dave's told me that this is the #1 hack to improve your forehand. And he'll dance to some trendy music and drop feed himself. And then you copy and paste that with all your players and it won't work because the context is different. The players are different. So what we have to do within coaching is we have to have an intention of our players. Again, tennis is quite simple. Put the ball in a position where your opponent can't get it back. And from my tennis coaching point of view, we look at stretching and jamming. Shout out to Matt Wiggum for helping with those words. Like, can you stretch your opponent? Can you jam? How the player achieves that is up to them. And my job is to guide the player towards that. So that's why we can't copy and paste. And we've seen it forever. Like here in the UK, for those coaches who are as old as me, and I've been doing this, 24 years, we've copied the Americans. We then copied the Belgians. We tried to copy we are now trying to copy the French. We're definitely trying to copy the Italians. We've also tried to copy the Americans again, and it doesn't work. We tried to copy the Spanish. And what happens is we look at these players, again, Sinner's a great example now. We'll look at the Italian system and we think the coaching is really, really powerful. Now, they're doing lots of really good stuff within their coaching framework, but we think it's the coaching. We don't look at how good the Italian competition structure is. We don't look at how great the Spanish competition structure is. We don't look at the amount of hours, the amount of hours unstructured opposed practice that the Spanish do. Yeah, they may do their suffering in the morning in their basket drill, but they'll play a lot of tennis in the afternoon. They'll spend all weekends playing tennis tournaments. We look at the coaching and we believe the coaching is the reason why these players are successful. And then we'll copy and paste it. And we'll see it here in the UK all the time. And I'll do a next live next week on the player pathway, but we'll look at like a Raducanu and we'll look at her data from ages 8 to 12. How many matches she played, what type of training did she do, how many individuals did she do, what methodology of coaching did she come into contact with, and we'll copy that and we'll then put it into this new system. And we believe that because we've copied a Grand Slam winner, this must work. It's not the methodology. It's so much more around the variability and sort of stuff that you can't control that will probably decide whether a player is successful or not. And that's the problem with copy and paste. It doesn't work, because if it did, everyone just copied the Spanish. And we've seen it, like the Americans try to copy the Spanish. They've not been anywhere near as successful. Everyone now is copying the Italians because they believe that they're getting lots of success. They must have the secret sauce. It's not the secret sauce. And that's why we never get out this loop of traditional tennis coaching, because we think basket drilling, it's really effective and efficient, even though the science evidence shows otherwise. So it's a bit like the flat earth and the sphere. Like, even though the evidence and research and the science shows as well, the earth is probably round, it's probably not flat, people still don't believe the science, and there's still flat earthers out there. Hence why people still believe basket drilling is really efficient and effective, despite the fact that there's a lot of evidence to show it doesn't really work that way. So we just got to be careful with that copy and paste mentality. And what we have to understand from an ecological point of view is movement emerges, it doesn't copy. And that's why, again, I've really pulled back on demonstrations of my sessions. Like, I can show you how to hit a forehand, but it's pretty pointless, because your movement is based on the perception, the information in the environment. And that information might be your opponent's position, the incoming ball, your position, the score, the wind, the sun, who's watching, what round of tournament it is, the environment itself. Are you playing on a prestigious court like Queen's Club, or are you playing down the park? All those factors, all the information will affect your movement. So just by looking and copying me in a demonstration won't transfer, because the body doesn't remember what you've just showed it. The body just interacts with the information that's available in real time. And that's what ecological psychology is. So at the moment, I've got a coffee cup here in front of me. Like, I know it's there. Like, I've not got a pre-programmed remembrance of how to pick a coffee cup up and bring it to my lips. My body, my system is built off intention. So I'm thirsty. I'm getting a dry throat from talking too much. I know there's coffee there. So that's where my attention's gone to. And I can just pick it up and have a drink. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not trying to copy a model in my head of how to pick it up and find my lips. I'm just interacting. And that's what perception action is. I've got information from the world, and that might be my intention. I'm thirsty, getting a dry throat. That's information. I know there's a coffee cup in front of me in a mug, and I know how to take action and pick it up. So a good way of segueing some some drinking to get my dry throat out the way. But that's what we do with the forehand. So when I hit my forehand, I'm using information in real time. I'm using information such as my opponent's position, the ball coming in, my position, my intention. So if I want to drive and attack the forehand, I'm going to move differently if I'm going to defend the forehand. So you may see a flatter stroke. If I'm defending, it may be a block. If I'm sort of trying to push my opponent deep, I may go low to high a little bit more. So my intention drives the movement. And that's what we're trying to do with ecological dynamics. So you won't see me basket drill ever, unless I'm doing a national governing body workshop or qualification where it's part of their syllabus. So don't be going, oh, I've seen you basket drilling on a course. If I'm in lessons, I won't basket drill, because again, the transfer of learning is minimal. Because when you basket drill, you completely nullify and sometimes decouple that perception action. You almost take away intention. You almost take away attention. And those two things are really important for movement. If you take away all the context and you're just left with the movement, and it's an internal focus and an internal representation, then you'll get really robotic looking players, and they're just trying to replicate the movement. And I've seen this firsthand with an adult beginner who I started working with 12 months ago. And she's had a few lessons before, and she comes to me and every single stroke looks the same, no matter what ball she's given. Because again, she can't link the movement to the perception. She's just focusing on the movement. And it was really tough at the start because she couldn't adapt to different types of shots. So if I hit the ball higher, she'd miss. If I hit the ball quicker, she'd miss. If I hit the ball the same way in which she was taught, she'd probably get the ball back because she had that skill, that perception action loop. After 12 months of working with this lady, like this week, she's completely adaptable. She can adapt to any type of ball that I give her, and she finds different solutions. And all I've done with this lady is play tennis with her every single week for 1 hour, and we just play. And we may bring attention to certain things. So can I bring her perception to certain information that's really relevant? Can I drive her intention more in certain situations? So in this situation, you're under challenge, so you can't attack the ball, so you may have to defend. In this situation, you're definitely more balanced and comfortable. Can you actually increase the speed? With her, like, and I see it from other coaches who have lessons next to us, and they're doing the basket drill and stuff. At the start, she was a bit unsure because it was the opposite way till she was trained. I said to her, like, you've got to trust me. Like, this is going to take time. And that's a hard thing as well with an ecological approach, is it takes time. Like, I'm not going to basket feed you. I've never basket fed her once. I'm not going to tell you how to hit the ball, but I'm going to put you into situations where you're going to develop this, what we call perception action coupling. And you're going to find multiple ways to hit the shots. And in 12, 18 months time, you'll be able to play tennis to a good level. And she can. And that took a lot of faith from her and a lot of trust. But it also takes a lot of patience from me, because again, when we're talking about variability, if you think about the multiple different ways you can hit a forehand, there's probably an unlimited amount. So that's going to take time to build up that variability. And that takes patience. When I get the basket out, yes, I can make you look really good, really quick. And you have, again, the fake confidence of improvement, and you have the fake confidence of, I'm getting better doing this. But when you put it into an open dynamic situation, it all disappears. Again, I've told the story a million times. That's one of the reasons why I started to question why the way I was coaching. How can I coach a basket forehand and you get it, and then when I put you into a match, it disappears? So this lady is a perfect example. And sometimes I feel like I'm letting her down because we are just generally playing tennis. And again, another great example, a young boy that I'm working with over the past 12 months, all we do is play tiebreak. Each tiebreak will have different intentions and different constraints and stuff, but all we do is play tiebreaks throughout the whole session because he's, pardon me, he's 9 years of age. So at Orange, he plays tiebreaks. So we play sets of tie breaks and we manipulate constraints and change the rules for each tie break. And his mum said to me, it's amazing because every session he must play like over 120 points in that session. So yeah, good. That's because that's what we do. Even our warm up is we play points in the boxes with an intention. And again, my practices now are much more representative because they look and feel like tennis. What Jannik Sinner was doing now doesn't look and feel like tennis. That's what I said. Like he'll get very little transfer of skill from an ecological point of view. Doing a basket drill, it doesn't really work because the skill transfer is so limited. And I think that's the biggest sort of thing. And we are coming towards the end of the podcast. And I know there's quite a lot of comments stuff, which I'll come to in a few moments. That's what we have to do. We have to keep the context within the game. We can't strip away and decouple the game. And I did this on a presentation a few weeks ago on a workshop. Like as tennis coaches, we think if we take out a segment, let's say contact point, if we take out the contact point of the perception action or the hitting cycle, whatever you want to call it, if we improve that by drop feeding and lots of demos, hit the ball in front of your shoes, if we get that really good, we can just put it back into the system and then it'll work really well. But we have to understand that contact point is based on a really variable and dynamic perception action system. You can't take it away. So when I'm working on contact point, what I have to do is maybe sometimes scale it down. And this is what we call scaling. So we just make things a little bit smaller. So we may reduce court size. We may slow the ball down. We may reduce a couple of different options, but we keep it within the context of the game. Like with my sessions, everything starts with a serve, no matter the level, no matter if you're a beginner, yeah, or if you're a TOTS tennis player, everything starts with serve, no matter what. And then we work on that attention within the context of a game. And that includes points. So it has to include the serve, has to include points. And there may be something within the rules or the environment where I make the intention attractive. So if I'm working on contact point, you may score more points if you win a point by going cross court, or you may win points by going down the line. You won't win as many points by going center. Again, just using a very loose example here. But we can't take tennis out of context. And I spent 18 years coaching out of context. And again, only a couple of players were successful. I would say now, if I was to look at, I'd say 100% of my players, how many are successful? It's a lot higher than 2%. I would say most of my players, all my players I work with can play tennis. And that's to a different level. Like tonight I've got Reds, and the Reds have just started sort of coming to me. And yeah, they don't look like county level Reds yet. But they can all play tennis. They can all serve. They can all play points. They all know how to score. They all know how to win points. They also know that sort of losing is quite an important part of that as well. And that all starts from, okay, I understand that, okay, the serve's going to be a push. The forehand's going to be a bit of a push. The backhand might be a bit of a jab. That's fine, because that's part of learning. I'm not going to go in tonight, the Reds, and start talking about semi-Western grips and ripping up the back of the ball, because I'm going to meet the players where they're at. Like, can I make you successful with what you have today? But can I make it a little bit better? And then in 6-8 months' time, because I'm constantly just doing that very small improvement each week, you'll start to see those more complex skills emerge. You'll start to see those red players hitting with topspin. You'll start to see the red players swinging and getting their racket back here on the serve, whereas at the minute it's here. But that's okay, because I've got time. And a lot of coaches think that time, oh, I've got an hour. I haven't got an hour, I've got years. I've got years, but also it goes back to an earlier point. These players are going to grow and develop. They're going to get quicker. They're going to get stronger. The body's going to unleash the degrees of freedom. If you don't know what that is, check out last week's podcast. So I'm in no rush, but I'm never going to take the game away. I'm never going to throw and catch. Why? Because you don't throw and catch in tennis ever. So why would I spend hours practicing throwing and catching, which is an important skill for physical literacy, but it's not an important skill in tennis. Now, obviously, if you're working with performance players, like strength and conditioning is important and stuff like that. But if I'm working with once a week, I'm not going to waste time throwing and catching. I'm going to spend more time striking and playing tennis. Again, you just scale it down. So people say to me, yeah, but you can't do that with blue stage players. It's called floor tennis. Floor tennis is a great way to play tennis. If you can't perceive the ball and take action after the bounce, play it on the floor, play it with multiple bounces, play it with a bigger ball, play with no net. That's where scaling sort of comes in. Well, there we go. So that's my take on why we shouldn't copy professional players. And there's quite a few comments. So I'm just going to change my screen. And I'm going to put the comments up and we'll go through each one. Yeah, I'm pretty good. So yeah, thanks. I'm all right. Had a good week off last week. So the first sort of question, Gio or Gia, how are you? I'm really good. So yeah, thanks for checking in. So Willow says, exactly, it's not idealized, refined biomechanics. It's partly evolutionary psychology, behaved by Robert Sableski. I'm going to absolutely butcher names here, so apologies. I am a Scouser. Is the ultimate understanding of human behavior and can apply to anything. And that's a really good point, Willow. Like for me, and I said this again on a call this week with a group of coaches from Asia, I'm in a human behavior business. Like I work with humans. So the most important part of my coaching is to completely understand human behavior. So when I set up a practice, I'm not looking at biomechanics. I'm not looking so much at maybe tactical intention from the player. I'm looking at behavior. How does the player interact with the game? Is it a positive interaction or is it potentially a negative interaction? Like, are they failing? Are they having frustration? And now I've got to guide you towards something where we can get a bit more success. If they're highly successful with that interaction, okay, now I've got to destabilize you. I've got to make you a little bit uncomfortable because that's where learning's done. And with a lot of my coaching, it is just human behavior. And I'm just looking at how players, humans, are interacting with the game. I'm not looking at biomechanics. And it always goes back to the intention of the game. Like, can they put the ball in a position where their opponents misses? And I think that's the part that's missing from a lot of coach education. Like, we're not taught about human behavior. We're not taught about psychology. It's getting better. We're now getting little bits of psychology into coach education. Unfortunately, a lot of it is cognitive psychology. So a lot of information processing and the brain as the controller and stuff like that, which is, again, now starting to become a little bit outdated and a bit challenged in psychology circles. That's why my tennis coaching was sort of trying to bring in a bit more ecological psychology. But yeah, absolutely right. Human behavior. So Giacampo, again, sorry if I'm butchering these names, apologies. Hi, Steve, how are you doing? I'm very good, thank you. Can you tell us a few examples of how you train self-belief in a performance player with an ecological approach? So self-belief is the number one goal. So I want my players to be super confident when they play. So I come at my approach from a very strength-based approach. Like, what are you really good at? What do you really enjoy doing? How can we make that even better? And obviously, every single player is going to have weaknesses and stuff they can get better at. For me, it's okay, can we defend those things? So generally speaking, it's working with the player and getting to know them. It goes back to the previous comment about human behavior. Like, what are you really good at? What do you enjoy doing? And can we do that more? So most players will enjoy forehands. Okay, well, how can we use your forehand as a bit more of a weapon? Or backhand isn't as good. That's fine. Doesn't have to be. Don't have to be really good on both sides. Your backhand, again, my own game, my backhand just survives and tries to get the ball back on my forehand. So I'll build a game around the player's strengths, what they're good at. Sometimes they don't realize what they're good at, especially on the serve. A lot of players at all levels, especially juniors, the serve is just seen as get it over and in to start the point. At the top level, the serve is a strength. So I always, goes back to every single rally starts with a serve. I build up a lot of confidence and self-belief in their serves. We do a lot of serving in my sessions. A player will probably serve between 60 and 100 serves in a session with me in an hour, in a group session and in an individual. What that does, one, it builds confidence. Players lack confidence and self-belief on serve because we don't do it enough. We do it at the 10 minutes at the end. And because we only do it for 10 minutes at the end, they don't get enough volume, repetition, horrible word, but we want repetition, right? Repetition, same outcome, different ways of doing it. And I get my players to serve from lots of different crazy positions. So there's lots of clips on my YouTube channel of me getting players serving from out wide, behind the baseline, in close. I get my players to be, again, cheesy, comfortable in the uncomfortable. And if your training and your practice is constantly making your players slightly uncomfortable, they become comfortable. And that's where the belief goes back into the whole idea of confidence. If I basket feed my players with self-belief and confidence, it's fake. So I get my players to be confident and have lots of self-belief within the chaos of games. And that just means making sure a lot of my practices are chaotic. A lot of my practices are exploring and winning and losing and struggle. And I've just started working with a group of under 14s over the past few weeks, and they were coached in a very traditional way, very explicit, very lots of demos, lots of correct ways of playing, and they were been coached that way for 2 years. I've come in, and it's the opposite way. It's a case of, this is a learning environment, it's not a performance environment. Even though we are a performance group, when you're on court in training, we are learning. So learning means to explore, to try stuff that you wouldn't normally try, to be brave, to take risks, and be happy making mistakes, which I know sounds really weird, but we need to make mistakes for information. We need to know our limits of our physical action capacity, of how we play. We need to know how hard we can hit the ball without the ball going out. We only know that by hitting the ball hard and then recalibrating. And a lot of it is just shifting mindset with players. So a lot of my talk with players at all ages is understanding what learning is. Learning is exploring, taking risks. Learning is uncomfortable. Learning is pushing yourself out the boundaries of your own physical constraints or individual psychology constraints. And my players, I would say, are quite comfortable now being uncomfortable. And that's almost opposite to how I used to coach. Everything used to be nice. Everything used to be regimented and fluffy. And you look at a session and it looked like there's loads of learning going on and the players are really good. But it was just a big illusion, because I was isolating it. I was making it really easy for the players to achieve success, because I wanted the players to be confident. I want the players to be happy. I wanted the parents to be happy as well. So everything was just this fake illusion, a bit like what Sinner's doing in that video. It looks really good and we believe learning's taking place. But now it's just making them really uncomfortable and sort of trying to stretch them a little bit. And they get confident and they grow self-belief within the chaos. And it's that goes back to one of the great questions before. It's just behavior. Again, I could have one practice design and 3 players will interact with it really positively. 3 players will interact with it in a negative way. They'll get frustrated and they'll find it really tough. And that's okay, because all 6 are individuals. And what's happened there, the 3 players who are interacting with positively, they see the opportunities in the practice. The other 3 just see the threats. And my job there is, well, the 3 who see it as a threat, can you see opportunity? Because in any situation, there's always opportunity. The 3 players who see opportunity, great. But now can you stretch yourself and make yourself uncomfortable and find more opportunities? And that's all it is. It's that constant guiding of sort of trying to get them better and understand the chaos a little bit more. Great question. So Willow again, yes, meeting players where they're at. That's the inner game of tennis. The inner game of tennis is a really interesting one, because it's obviously probably the most famous tennis coaching book in the world. And there's lots of ecological psychology in there. It's not classed as ecological psychology, but it's very much internal, external focus. And yeah, I think Galloway, is it? I always forget the guy's name. Tim Galloway. Yeah, way ahead of his time. And what's really interesting, that book, I reckon most tennis coaches worth their salt have read that book, but very few actually apply it. And it's been around since the 70s, and it's such a good, powerful book. And you will see it come out more. And it's interesting because that came out in and around the same time as James Gibson started to write more about ecological psychology. A good friend of mine, Andy Nibbs, please check out Andy Nibbs' Inner Game of Tennis, or I can't remember his name. Sorry, Andy, if you're listening. But he does a lot of work of Inner Game of Tennis. And Andy now has messaged me saying that he started to use more ecological psychology, because again, the Inner Game of Tennis is all about human behavior. So yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, and Willow again. Look at the checks into 70s. It's interesting because again, a lot of the check system now is. I can't remember what podcast it was. I think it was Control the Controllables, and they've got quite. I'm sure it was a check. So I may be wrong. Please let me know in the comments if I am. But they were talking about why a lot of their juniors are so successful at the moment. And they had one of the lead check coaches on, Dan Keenan's podcast, and he said, "Well, it's not the coaching. Like our coaching in the country, I might get the country wrong, by the way, sorry, but our coaching isn't that good. Like our coaching isn't that great. But what we've got is a really good competition program. And for me, that's the secret sauce. Look at the competition program. Here in the UK, our competition program isn't great. We haven't got enough competition. It's all too regimented and structured into grades. Players don't compete at a variable level. Everyone's just pigeonholed, and the better players play with the better players at higher grades. But we don't have that ecosystem, and it's no good producing 5% of players. Like we need to produce like 70% of players. And it's interesting as well because Dan Keenan did a podcast this week. I can't remember the guy's name, Chris Lewitt, and Dan was saying, yeah, in Spain now the competition structure is actually disappearing. It's not as good as it used to be, and they're going much more down the methodology route. And it'll be interesting now what happens with the Spanish system. Like for me, competition is definitely the way forwards. And yeah. So the MALD, I have two students who I'm teach the correct contact point and stance. They lack a muscular effort to hit the ball faster. How do you help them start performing a muscular effort without the basket? Good question. A couple of things that sort of stand out straight away. What is correct? I think contact point. What is a correct contact point? If I'm going to go down a line, my contact point is slightly late. If I go cross court, my contact point is definitely a lot earlier. If I'm hitting the ball flat, different contact point. If I'm hitting the ball with topspin, different contact point. If I'm playing on clay, different contact point. If I'm playing on grass, different contact point. And my stance changes all the time. So even if I play this evening on a hard indoor acrylic, I play open, I play closed, I play semi-open. I play sometimes, more often than not, completely off balance as well. So when we look at things like correct, that's really tough because yes, you may basket feed it and you may assume you're developing a correct contact point, but because the game is so variable, like no two shots will ever come the same way, no two balls will ever be the same, that contact point has to be adaptable. So the first thing I'd look at is I don't want a correct contact point. I want a adaptable contact point. I want a adaptable stance. And that goes back into perception action. If you said one of the main problems there is the lack of muscular effort to hit the ball faster. Again, it's hard to say because I don't see the players. So I can't actually watch and see the players. So I can't really comment. A lot of it is probably they're too tense. Like if it's a muscle effort, they're probably too tight and tense. And if, again, not saying you are. Again, I'm just going off with the question. But if they're internally focused, if they're looking for something that's correct, then they are going to tense up. They're going to start getting a lot tighter because they're trying to actually think about how the body's moving. They're not actually focused on the external effort. How would I do it without basket feeding? Again, I just contextualize the drill. So a really easy one that I do with contact point, and I'm sure this is on one of my videos with the backhand, how to improve the backhand, multiple contacts. So let the player have two touches. Because if they have a really bad first touch, if that contact's late, the ball will spin off. If they have an open racket face, the ball will spin off. So if they've got to control the ball first and then send it, they're working out racket work, body work, and footwork, how to actually make contact with the ball. So that's a really easy one. And it looks and feels like tennis. I'm pretty sure if you check out the backhand video on my channel, I show how to improve the contact point on the backhand. Again, I'll just scale it down. I wouldn't ever decouple perception and action, but I'd be looking at an adaptable contact point and stance. But great question. Again, I spent 18 odd years trying to find correct stances and correct grips and correct pathways, and I never found it. Whereas now I look at more of a adaptable way. Willow, I think you're going to be my number one fan today, mate. Some great questions here. I've got quite a few more to go through as well. So thanks for sticking with us. How much verbal feedback do you give during points in your session? Great question. Very little feedback. I I tend to do most of my feedback now at change of ends. So I change ends every other game, or if I'm playing with the kids, tie break every 6 points. 2 reasons. Number one, that's when they'll have to reflect and think about it in matches. So I want them to reflect in the moment. So a lot of my feedback generally, if it's a lot of feedback, it's then. And how that feedback's given has changed massively as well. So more often than not, it's a player first, coach second. So I'll ask the player what they felt. So what challenges has the game presented? What solutions have you came up with? And then from their answers, then I'll try and guide them to sort of some solutions as well. I don't really give a lot of feedback. If it's in the points and the player is really, really struggling and frustrated, I may ask a couple of questions to try and bring their attention to something that's relevant. So again, if the player, going back to the previous question, if the player is trying too hard, so if they're really tight and rigid and they're just trying to smack the ball and they haven't got that muscle relaxation, okay, it may be a case of how's your breathing? Because if they're tight and tense, they're probably going to stop breathing. How's your breathing? When are you breathing out? So again, I'll just try and bring their attention to something. So if they're really struggling in the moment, I might give a couple of coaching cues. But a lot of the feedback would generally be at change of ends. But most of it is player-led. A lot of it is a question by me, lots of information from the player, and then I'll sort of get that information and guide them. And that's really important as well, because if we talk about perception action, I don't see what the player sees. So the player will act based on their perception, and their perception will be what they see, what they hear, and what they feel. I don't know. I'll have a perception from my point of view, but I'll have a bias as well. So I need to get that information out of the player. And I'm sure I'll talk about that at a different time. Great question. Cameron, hope you're doing well, Steve. Most people forget that the pros don't just practice tennis. They have strength and mental conditioning coaches. Yeah, it's a really good point. Again, Cameron, people, coaches, players, parents will look at pro practices and think that's the secret sauce, but they don't see everything else going on behind it. There's so much variabilities that go on that we don't see. And for me, I'd love to see a study that shows how much learning's done in practice training and how much learning's done when they play matches. And there's no secret, right? Like at my center, our most successful players in terms of ratings and rankings and getting invitations to regional and national camps, just look at their match count. They definitely play the most matches. So for me, like, is the learning really done? Because they're all trained the same way as everyone else, but their match count was a lot higher. Like for me, that's where you get the most learning done, is in the matches. And that's why I always say to parents, you don't need more lessons, you need more tennis. You need to play more matches. And that match might be friendly matches, it might be competition, whatever it be. Just you need to play tennis. You need coaching as well, because a coach's job guides and shapes learning and brings your attention and intention to certain things. But you definitely need to play. And yeah, nice point, Cameron. Yeah, that's why you just can't copy the pros. And the thing is, if we just copy the pros, we'd all be really good at tennis. Like I could go out and just copy Sinner's training to the absolute letter. I'd never be as good as Sinner because I'm not him. And two, he's probably more attuned and skillful to different affordances than I am. And yeah, copy and paste is it's rife within coaching, and we need to move away from it. So Giacomo, sorry, Gia, I call you Gia. Easy for me to say. Hey, Steve, what do you think about goal setting? I believe there should be medium, long-term goals. Yeah, listen, for me, goal setting is really important. So I'm going to sort of pull from Mark Bennett. So Mark Bennett is a really successful multi-sports coach, and he's got a performance development system. And please do check him out because he's really good at goal setting. And he talks, I think, about a lighthouse. So a lighthouse is your goal, like what you're working towards. So some players, it might be Wimbledon. Some players, it might be to play in the first team at a club. Some players, it might be just to play with my kids when I'm older. Whatever it might be, that's your lighthouse. We all need an end goal. We all need a destination that we're working towards. Sometimes we'll never reach that lighthouse, but it's something that we work towards, a beacon of light or whatever it might be that we work towards. And then from that, I talk to my players, okay, well, what do we need to do to get you closer to that lighthouse? and what do you want to do? Because sometimes needs and wants are two different things. So what do you need to do? Well, if you want to be a Wimbledon player, like, you can't just have 10 hours of coaching a week and play one tournament once a month. Like, that's not going to happen. So you need to play lots of matches. So that would be part of my goal setting. If you want to play number one in the team, if you want to play in the first team at your club, okay, well, you need to play at a lower level. So you need to play in the fourth team and then work your way up. You probably need to have some coaching, and that coaching has to be designed around playing doubles. If it's a doubles league, you're going to have to get really good at playing doubles in the different scenarios and roles and responsibilities. Okay. Do you need to work on your net play? So I'll have a lighthouse with my players, and then it's a needs and wants. And those needs and wants have to match up as well. Because if a player wants to play at Wimbledon, but they don't feel they need to play matches, then there's a disconnect there. But that's, I think we definitely need, and for me, it goes back to that thing of intention. Like, every lesson I have, there's a clear intention, and that intention is getting my players closer to that lighthouse. And then within that session, what can I guide their attention to? So goal setting is really, really important. And last one, the mild. Thank you, Steve. I'll try out my practice. Listen, my friend, please do try it out. If we can scale it down, there's lots of information on my YouTube channel, lots of different videos and stuff as well, and of sort of representative learning design. If you wanted to see how I do it in real life, check out my From Drills to Skills course. So my Drills to Skills course is a 12-module course. It's like $60, like £40 UK. And I show you lots of examples, how I do lots of those traditional things, contact point, racket path and stuff, how I teach that to players at all different ages and stages. Listen, this has probably been my most successful live stream. Lots of comments, lots of questions, lots of good engagement stuff as well. Thank you so much. It's massively appreciated. Next week, I've got a really good one next week. I'm going to discuss player pathways. So here in the UK, we have a player performance pathway. And there was an interesting conversation this week with a senior manager of the performance pathway. And I'm going to unpack some of the information that was brought out, bring in some of my feelings to it as well. And we're going to talk about why I think the player pathway is completely broken and why it's not successful and why we need to rethink it and rechange it. As always, if you are interested in how I coach, do again, check out the link down below into my newsletter. If you're watching a repeat, check out the video on the screen now. And until next week, have a great week and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update.